So Nick stays at the party, and he kind of justifies the fact that maybe Gatsby's party was still better than the world that Daisy's in. He says, after all, in the very casualness of Gatsby's party, there were romantic possibilities totally absent from her world. What was up there in the song that seemed to be calling her back inside because she's singing that song at the end? What would happen now in the dim, incalculable hours? Remember that Gatsby, as a person, he's about hope. He's a person about dreaming, and Tom is like the opposite to that. He's like very much in the here and now. And then Nick wonders. He says, perhaps some unbelievable guest would arrive, a person infinitely rare and to be marveled at, some authentically radiant young girl who, with one fresh glance at Gatsby, one moment of magical encounter, would blot out those 5 years of unwavering devotion. So Nick's saying, maybe somebody will come to the party and Gatsby will fall madly in love with her, and he'll be able to just, forget about what was and move on. So he stays late. Gatsby has asked him to wait until he's free, and then he stays in the garden, and there's people in the pool. And Gatsby comes down, and he doesn't look very good. He looks tired. And the first thing he says is she didn't like it, because really this party was for Daisy, it wasn't for anyone else. And Nick says, of course she did. And he says, no, she didn't like it. She didn't have a good time. Um, and and Nick can see he's very depressed. And he says, he feels far away from her. Um, and Understand that Gatsby doesn't just want Daisy to be in love with him. I mean, he's succeeded in that. He wants her to sort of delete the past. He says he wanted nothing less of Daisy than that she should go to Tom and say, I never loved you. After she obliterated 3 years with that sentence, they would decide upon the more practical measures to be taken. So there's something about Gatsby that he's an all or nothing type of person. It's not just enough for him to get Daisy. He's got to get her to make this announcement that everything was a mistake that happened with Tom. And then they're going to go back to, then they would, when she was free, they would go back to Louisville and be married from her house, just as if it were 5 years ago. So this is not just about being in love. It's about wanting to go back in time. And he says, and she doesn't understand. She used to be able to understand. We'd sit for hours. And he's, and then he starts walking around with all the mess of the party. And Nick says to her, this is a very, very important part of the book. Nick says to him, I wouldn't ask too much of her. You can't repeat the past. Can't repeat the past, he cried incredulously. Why, of course you can. Okay, so this is this is the kind of illusion that Gatsby believes in, okay? Um, and he's very, very determined about this. And he says, I'm going to fix everything just the way it was before, he said. She'll see. So he's going to do what he's good at doing, which is setting things up, staging things. And he wants Daisy to come to this realization. I mean, she had a child in between, but let's just kind of forget about that one for a minute. Um, he talked a lot about the past, and I gathered that he wanted to recover something, some idea of himself that had gone into loving Daisy. So it's not just about Daisy, it's about also something about Gatsby. Maybe the ideal, the person who wanted to become a famous person before he got into all the illegal ways of making money, if we think about it. I don't know who's saying this. I imagine that this is Nick's account of what Gatsby says to him. But he says his life had been confused and disordered since then. But if he could once return to a certain place and go over it all slowly, he would find what that thing was. Okay, so and he's remembering that moment in time when him and Daisy found each other, and the incredible romance and the excitement and the possibility. This is also what's interesting, that when you go back in time, a lot of what the excitement is and what the mood of a certain moment is the possibility. I mean, when you think about a wedding is all about the possibility. You've got two people who love each other, who are building a life together. And a lot of the mood and the fervor and the wonderful things that go about a wedding is it's about the potential. But once the potential has happened, then you can't go back to it. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, you can't remarry somebody when you've been married with them for 10 years. You've been married with them for 10 years and good things have happened, but that kind of dreamy stage of what's going to be, that's over. You already realized it. But he wants to recapture it. It's as if like he's kind of um, denying the here and now. He really wants to just escape into the fantasy of the potential, because that moment when they met, there's no such thing as perfection. There is that love at first sight, but then you have to get on with being together. Anyway, I'm digressing a bit here. Um, we've got him imagining that he's going to kiss her, and she's going to blossom for him into a flower. And it says, and the incarnation was complete, meaning incarnation is when you come back to life again. Like an incarnation is you die and then you come back to life in the same form or maybe in a different form. Um, and so he says, though all he said, even through his appalling sentimentality, meaning he's so sentimental that Nick can't handle it, right? He says, even though through his appalling sentimentality, I was reminded of something, an elusive rhythm, a fragment of lost words that I'd heard somewhere a long time ago. For a moment, a phrase tried to take its shape in my mouth, and my lips parted like a dumb man's, as though there was more struggling upon them than a wisp of startled air. So Nick's also trying to recount something, some words. It reminds him of something that happened, but he doesn't know what it is. Um, and but they made no sound, and what I had almost remembered was uncommunicable forever. Okay, so he can't bring back that memory.